This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now.
Okay, so where we left off was you were describing how a trans identity and a trans narrative, the trans conversations, the ripple effect of those conversations and that narrative is that other people are coming to terms with different parts of their own personalities and identities and so forth. And I want you to mention the author one more time, just in case there are people who want to do more research.
Alok Vaid Menon.
Can we spell that? Just
it's Alok Vaid and then MENON. They're phenomenal. And they're on Instagram. You can find them. Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I wouldn't be doing my job as a journalist if I didn't bring up some of the things that other people are saying. Some of these things I've heard personally. Okay. This is not meant to amplify ignorance or hatred, but these are things that exist in the world, and this is the forum where we talk about these things.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you allowing me to do this. I love you with my whole heart.
I know.
And I mean, you
absolutely.
Yeah. So, I still want to be as kind as I can. I don't know how to not be him. So let's try it this way. They, them typically refers to more than one person. People are then forced to use awkward language, or if they forget or don't wish to accommodate that, be labeled as a bigot. Is that fair to them?
It's a good question. I think that, well, first of all, I think there's a huge difference between forgetting and intentionally not using that language.
Okay.
Because one is human. It could also be that you change your name and sometimes you forget. When my friends change pronouns, I have slip-ups accidentally. I'm human. And even though they, them is in my lexicon, if I have a friend who starts using a pronoun that I'm not familiar with, it's going to take me a little bit to adjust to that. And that's okay. I love them with my whole heart. I show up for them. People that I love in my life don't use they, them all the time and accidentally use she, or just really struggling with it. And that's okay.
I've done it on this show.
Yeah.
So
I know you love me. I know where your heart is. It'd be different if you to be like, I refuse to call you that. I think that then I was having a conversation with a friend about this recently as well. I think the noun I'm going to try to lay this out as much as makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the noun bigot is difficult because people can change. I do believe that. I do think that also that doesn't mean we don't take accountability for our, if you are saying things that are bigoted, if you are saying things that are transphobic, I still think that's true. However, I do think that I don't want to necessarily condemn people for being like that. It's necessarily like that forever. One of my dearest friends, when I first met him, told him I use they, them. And he's like, I don't really get down with that. And then over time, as we've talked, because he's someone who's really wants to grow, it's like, okay, let's talk about it. I love you. We're getting to know each other. And we met in a context where if I'd met, if we had met each other just on the street, I probably wouldn't have wanted to be friends. But we had this friendship develop. And over time, and now he almost only uses they, them, almost never slips up, and is really like, I want to understand you, and I want to like understand what this means for you. Right. So I think that there's like, I just want to name that, I guess, that I think people aren't necessarily fixed. I do think so. I'm not necessarily gonna, I guess, maybe use the noun bigot. But I do believe that people should also be accountable for their actions in the same way that, like, if you're doing something, like, there's been a lot of like, people don't want to be called racist, right? But if you're doing things that are enacting white supremacy, if you're doing things that are racist, you also need to be accountable for your actions and for the impact of that.
Can I add something right here, please?
Go for it. Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that, because I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
This was, the pandemic was still going on.
Yeah.
So this was a couple years back.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very, very opposed to switching up the pronoun game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do I need to switch up my pronoun game to, accommodate this new blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now, this friend of mine, just because it's important to the story, because it helps you to identify potentially what his blind spots might have been. He's a white man. I love him. My whole heart. I'm as black as the ace of spades, right? So he and his family, if they were ever going to be racist or bigoted or anything like that, it would have stopped when they met me. And I've known this whole family for decades, plural. Mm-hmm. Very, very close, very good people, good people. I want to make sure I say that these are good people. Him in particular, he says this to me: I don't want to switch up my pronoun game, blah, 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 this and the third. And I'm like, oh, how could you say this? Oh, gutted. So we had a back and forth. Again, I want you to see his blind spots. Yeah. You know what I mean? I says to him, once upon a time, my dear friend, Black people, we didn't want to be called certain things. And we needed to affirm who we were. We needed to make it very clear who we were not. We needed everybody to understand that. And it's challenging to do that. I was not alive during the time that I was envisioning in this story I was telling him, but I know the people that were alive, a lot of them, their last few moments was hanging in a tree, burning, or getting beat. Or, the last moments of their life were lived in horror, hearing the language that they didn't want to be called anymore, affirming their humanity and fighting for their dignity. That's heavy, right? So, to this man that I love, and in this conversation that I had with him, I learned, and he learned, a very significant parallel, because I'm gonna say this. I mean, no disrespect to all of my trans brothers and sisters. When the language is taught to me that is more sufficient than that, I will use it. But to my trans brothers and sisters and my LGBTQIA plus brothers and sisters, I will say
siblings.
Siblings. There we go. I like that. Okay. Yeah. And again, I mean, no disrespect, but I want to say this. Once upon a time, it was fashionable to be bigoted against Black people. It's not fashionable to be that anymore, right? Despite what we've seen in the past couple of years, I know that in society, like advanced society, you still gotta get your racism off and hush whispers in the corners. Still very powerful, has a very significant impact on outcomes and shapes how far people like me can go.
Yeah.
Not every time, but if we look at the numbers, you can see it clear as day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I say that to say that nowadays, I think it is perhaps more fashionable to be bigoted out loud to my trans sibling. And in that conversation with my dear friend, that parallel certainly helps to illuminate the similarities.
Yeah.
There's obviously more Black people. There's more terror that has lasted for
Absolutely.
a longer time in this country in the way that we would describe it. But I don't think that we, as a country, changed how we dealt with Black people because we all of a sudden started liking Black people. I think that we changed as a country how we dealt with Black people because it was the right thing to do. If we're committed to doing the right thing, then those parallels translate and transfer quite easily to our trans siblings. The last time we talked about this, I asked if we could have this conversation. And you said, not right now. I don't know if there was something there that requires maybe a degree of, you have to be calculated, or if it's just a lot, if I don't know what life is like as a trans person. I just learned that you were trans in this conversation. Right? I always know you were Maya. That's the main thing about you. And that's the thing that I've chosen to love. And I don't even think I chose. I think that it just kind of was going to happen either way. But
yeah, and that hasn't changed.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. But I want to ask maybe why conversations like this could be scary or overwhelming. Because what I don't want to have happen is we have a great conversation today, and then everybody's like, okay, I remember that one guy that I went to high school with.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, man? So you're trans, so let's talk about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I approached you in that way, where I was like, oh, tight. Now you got pronouns. Let's turn the mics on. Let's get something recorded.
Yeah.
And I saw an approach that I saw you heed the gravity of the conversation I was asking you to have.
Yeah.
And I would like for you to walk us through your thought processes and emotions so that when we're on the streets, or maybe when we're, as we're learning on our own journeys and as we're blossoming, those of us who don't identify as trans or don't use separate pronouns, but we are committed to respecting and loving the human beings with whom we share this planet, regardless. Yeah. I'd like for you to give us a little bit of that thought process and that emotional space so that we have insight into how to best approach.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I think I'm going to answer the question a little bit more broadly than
Please.
Brandon.
Yeah, go for it.
Just in that it's not, I guess, all relevant to how to have conversations with other people or for that purpose. But I think that, well, one, I want to be intentional because I can never speak. I'm not speaking for all non-binary and trans people by any means. Can't do that.
That's fair.
But I want to be really intentional about like what I do say, because I also understand that like that still has, well, I guess whatever impact it has, right? And that it's a conversation it's intimate, it's vulnerable. I didn't want to be on a mic because I didn't want to have to worry about being rambly or about, I think there's nothing wrong with crying, but I didn't want to have to worry about being rambly or crying or whatever it is, because I just wanted to be real with you, you know, and be present with you. And you are someone who I love and who I know is invested in understanding me, and I want to understand me just as I want to understand you. And I'm also someone who is like, I'm down to talk about this, especially with all of the people I love. Like I'm always open to whatever questions there are, because I know the hearts that they come from. I know it's, I love you, I want to get to know you better, or I don't understand these things. Okay. So when I know that, I'm down to have the conversation. I'm not interested in having this conversation with people who aren't interested in understanding, because I don't want to have to defend my humanity to you. And like, if you're not going to see me as valid, or if you just don't think that I should be how I am, and that's not going to change, then I don't have the energy to have that conversation most of the time. I do think though, for folks who do want to understand, it's all, it'd be, I also know that I am a lot more open to having conversations about this with people who I know way less than a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. I think that like, because everyone's different, right? Some people are down to have those conversations. And, I've had people where we don't know each other very well, but are like, hey, do you mind if I ask you, can you explain why you use they, them? Because I know a lot of people use it and I haven't really been down with it, but I just want to understand. And a lot of times if it's the heart that's coming with it, it's like, yeah, sure, I'm totally happy to talk about it, or talk about it with. Anyways, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I do think also part of that, I honestly think part of that comes from the fact that like, I don't have to do that for a lot of other parts of my identity. I'm white. I don't have to walk around explaining different things about white people to different folks. A lot of my friends who are Black and non-binary, or Black and queer, Black and trans, etc., don't want to be doing that work, which I understand, because people come up with all sorts of other questions about other parts of their identities. And that's fair. I don't think that like, it'd also be fine if I didn't want to have conversations like this with other people other than the people who I deeply love and care about. And I know love and care about me. So it's kind of like, I'm down to talk about this. This is something that I'm more than willing to do and happy to do. And also because sometimes they're just like questions that you can't find on the internet, right?
Sure.
And I do think the internet's a really helpful resource and tool, and there are plenty of people who are.
It can be.
Can be.
Well, let me say this before we're done, if I may. Mm-hmm. For people that want to have these conversations, it sounds like the right thing to do is to approach it with the right intentions. Yeah. The wanting to learn more, the intentionality, I think, translates quite a bit. It's not a freak show. It's not a, sideshow, anything crazy like that. Yeah. I love how you say humanity. Yeah. I think that dignifies every conversation that people might want to have if they center the humanity. Yeah. The other part of it is that I think that anybody who approaches this conversation as though they somehow are going to be the ones enduring a hardship by accommodating a pronoun, they've completely missed the fact that other people are living in a hardship as defined by them. And I think that's more than enough. Yeah. So with that in mind, we'll leave it right there. I thank you so much for coming on to the show, Maya. Yeah. It's always a joy to have this conversation with you. And I know that I've learned a lot. And my hope is that everyone else has learned a lot too.
Thank you for having me. I love you.
I love you too. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily
I got
Podcast.
one more thing I'd like to talk to you